Welcome to Education 101 with your host, Erik Wolfram. Education 101 is about the amazing education community we have in the greater Spokane area. We highlight the outstanding programs, teachers, supporters, and opportunities of the education community in the Spokane region. Education 101 is brought to you in part by STCU. Here's Erik.
And welcome to Education 101. I'm your host, Erik Wolfram. Today we're going to be talking about ALE, or alternative learning environments or experiences. And with me to talk about that, we've got Kevin Foster. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Erik.
You bet. Kevin has his own consulting firm with Foster Leadership Development. And then, Kevin, you're also working as a consultant with OSPI, or the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, working with schools and improvement, right?
That's correct.
Excellent. So you get to talk ALE today, right? And this is going to be a learning experience for me as well. You know, I've been in the education world for quite a while, but really on the traditional side of the house. And I really haven't spent a lot of time on that ALE side, although I know it's there. And one of the things that I'm definitely learning is ALE can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So let's start and talk about what is ALE, and at least to you and your expertise and where that comes from.
Sure. It is helpful, I think, to go back in history a little bit, a couple decades. When young people were not successful in a regular comprehensive school, particularly a large comprehensive high school,
right.
School districts sought alternatives. How might we approach this differently? And unfortunately, the kids who didn't fit in at times were labeled as being, misfits.
Yeah.
So the early days of the alternative high school were often kids who didn't subscribe to the rules, didn't attend regularly, didn't do their homework, a lot of didn'ts.
Yeah.
And typically people who wanted to give those kids a different kind of experience were teachers and staff members in the alternative schools, and really did their best for something more successful to happen for those kids.
Right.
But over time, Erik, other alternative settings came into play. With the advent of technology, we had more online schools.
True.
More what is referred to as blended schools, where a student might come to a building for half of their experience, blended with the other half of their experience being at home or at another site. Experiential learning,
sure.
Job-based learning,
okay,
where kids would go, would spend part of their time learning on the job, and the rest of their time learning in the regular school setting. And in the last 15 years or so, there's really been an advent of parent partnerships.
Okay.
Where school districts and parents came together. It's similar, a parent partnership is similar to homeschooling.
Right. That's what I was going to wonder. Is that number one, there's so many different pieces that you're talking about here. I mean, from on the job training to all these other pieces, but then the parent partnership, is that homeschool side, or is it a different way to say homeschool? I mean, that's the piece that automatically pops in my head. Again, this is that traditionalness of my thinking.
Right. So again, going back in history, there was some contention about homeschooling. We had belief systems where we didn't think that parents could really give their kids a high-quality education outside of the school setting. Over the last decade or so, many school districts have recognized that parents are the first teachers of their children and the best people to know what their kids' needs are. So a more contemporary view is that a school district and parents can form a partnership
Right.
And a lot of the learning can occur in the home, but specialized courses or things that parents aren't maybe prepared, particularly more advanced science and math. Parents can bring their kids to a site that's set up for partnership and collaborate with the school district to really get just the right thing, just what the parents and the kids need.
What they want and what they need.
Right.
And that sounds like a great deal. I mean, again, thinking of that partnership piece versus just that, and I'm going to do the finger quotes, homeschooling piece. I like that idea of the word you use there with the collaboration between the parents and the school to really make it work.
Right.
So that's interesting. With ALE, you sure talked about a whole lot of different examples, and I'm sure there's a lot of different examples beyond even what you were talking about there.
Right.
I think of some of those examples. You kind of talked in general. I think about like a skills center. I would imagine that's an ALE. And it should I be? Am I saying it is ALE right? I mean, with an ALE, alternative learning environment, alternative learning experience. Should we be talking? I've also heard the term non-traditional. What's right? I
Right.
as simple as that.
So I think an important distinction is ALE as a funding construct,
Okay.
as opposed to basic education, which is a funding construct.
Okay.
So public schools, get funding through the state based on student enrollment.
Okay.
And enrollment can be counted really in two ways. One is kids come to school. The school offers a program of just a little bit more than 1,000 hours of instruction over the course of the year.
Right.
And based on the number of kids who attend that school, there's a funding stream that comes to the school district and then is distributed to operate the schools in the school district. ALE funding is not based on a number of hours of instruction. It is based on a written student learning plan.
Okay.
And the student's progress along that plan, so their learning progress over time, and some requirements for regular contact with certificated teachers and some monitoring of progress over time. Examination of work samples, etc. And that, so not based on time, not based on the amount of time you're in a building, but based on the progress you're making towards learning objectives.
I see.
And funding then is allocated per student based on their progress towards learning plan.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a relatively small number of students in our state. Less than 10% are funded through that ALE mechanism. Now, so that's about funding.
Yeah.
Your question was about what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Right. So I think it is good to think about, we have traditional schools, so constructs that we're familiar with. Kids go to school for 180 days over the course of the year.
Sure.
You have the schedules that we're used to. So elementary is organized by grade levels. Kid stays typically in a class with a teacher for most of the day with some enrichment or some specialized learning over the course of the day. And then middle and high schools typically organized into 6 or 7 periods over the course of the day. And subjects are taught typically based on a curriculum that you go through over the course of the year. Alternative environments are really meant to meet the needs of students who really don't thrive in that kind of environment.
Gotcha.
So, and there are a lot, as we've talked about already,
Right.
a lot of different kinds of alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
So the instruction in an alternative setting might be thematic. It
Okay.
might be based on the arts, or it might be based on engineering,
Mm-hmm.
or it might be
Mm-hmm.
based on any number of themes. And the way learning is organized, I'll give an example of a popular method now, which is project-based learning.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you bring a group of kids together.
Mm-hmm.
They establish an interest in a certain topic, a certain area of study, and then a project is developed through which they learn their literacy, their science, their social studies or civics, and do a variety of projects like that over the course of a school year.
Okay.
But that's the glue that holds it together, as opposed to just going through the curriculum of a
Sure.
certain subject.
Almost that idea of, I think about, I'll say the traditional setup at the high school level, especially almost siloed, where you go to math, you go to civics, you go to all those other classes along the way, where kind of what you're talking about, if I'm hearing you correctly, is pick a theme and incorporate all of that stuff into it, which is that project-based learning, and let's do some things around that theme, but bring in all of this learning along with it along
Correct.
the way.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
just right. And
Okay.
and most typically, student interest and student choice are big drivers in
Right.
what the projects
Right.
are, or there's choice built into the big project, so students can pick areas of interest that they really want to delve
Right.
into.
And I think about, like, my son goes to Spokane Valley Tech or SVT.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like that is really one of those style of alternative learning environments, if you will.
Right.
Not based on funding, probably, just thinking about what you said, but based on traditional school setting versus this non-traditional or alternative setting.
Right.
Excellent. That's a great example. Okay. So we've got project-based learning. We've got ALE. When we start to think about funding versus the traditional funding, if you will, out there. What about something like virtual learning? Where does that kind of fit in? I know that's become a pretty big piece out there of kind of taking a look at. I see commercials for it a lot. And where does that fit into all of this?
Well, clearly, Eric, that's a alternative to a traditional comprehensive school setting. And families choose the virtual learning alternative for a variety of reasons. Sometimes kids socially are not comfortable, spending their days in a big school. Frankly, some families have safety concerns about schools.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a big topic now.
Yes, it definitely is. So, and then there are other considerations. So let's say a young person, for whatever leads them, they need to travel around the country. So they want some consistency in their education. Enrolling in a virtual school, an online school, can be a good option for those families.
Okay.
And we have young people who excel in, say, they're going to Olympic training. They want to continue to learn.
Sure.
A virtual or online school is a good option for those families.
It really gives that flexibility, if you will, versus the 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock of being in that traditional setting.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, and just let me continue with that just a little bit. So, again, how does all this get paid for? I mean, that's still a public school student who has a right to a free and appropriate public education, just like any other student. So, virtual schools follow the ALE, the Alternative Learning Experience funding requirements.
Okay.
So each of those students has a personal learning plan, progress towards accomplishing the objectives of that plan, determine whether or not that student is eligible for funding.
Okay. Definitely. I have a lot more questions, but this is
Sure.
a great conversation. Definitely, I feel like I'm learning a lot about just using the term ALE. I think there's a lot to that. But I tell you what, why don't we take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll continue this conversation about alternative learning environments. So we'll be right.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
I'm Jade Becker, and I'm a senior at Chewelah High School. I'm at STCU's Money Live event. In this scenario that we played today, I was a realtor. My spouse was a city worker. We had an 11-month-old child, and there was a lot of spending for that child, like diapers and formula, and had to buy toys and clothing. I'm very glad that I had this experience. It was super helpful. You need this to get far and ahead in life. I'm Jade Becker, and STCU is here for good.
The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. McNeese Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeese Wheeler Attorneys.
And welcome back to Education 101. Again, we're talking about ALE programs throughout the region, throughout the state, really, with Kevin Foster. So, you know, before we went to break, we were talking a little bit about the whole idea of ALE and what it is. And like I said, it's definitely still a new piece for me, even though I've been in the education field for a while. Talking about the difference of using the terminology ALE. Are we talking about the behind the scenes, the funding, which there's ALE funding versus that traditional funding based upon traditional seat time, if you will, and kind of the number of hours and days that they're in the class versus a student learning plan, which is the ALE piece. Great new learning for me. So that was good to really clarify what ALE is from the back end, from really that's that technical side, if you will. Then we started talking about what are some of the different programs. Again, let's call them non-traditional. Let's call them ALE. It's almost that user experience now that we've got the other side out of the way. So, you know, we were talking about user experience from project-based learning like Spokane Valley Tech, where my son goes, to even that online program as well, you know, and some of the reasons why students would do that. You brought up a word that I think kind of drives some of the decisions for families, and that's the choice piece.
Right.
You know, talking about, well, tell me a little bit, choice. How does that drive these experiences and these environments or experiences for the kids?
So, Eric, what we're coming into in say this decade is much more empowerment for families to make choices about what the best education is for their kids. 20, 30 years ago, it was a given. You were going to go to the neighborhood school.
That's right.
There weren't really any other choices, and what choices there were more forced choices, particularly, you know, the old connotation of the alternative high school. Kids who were misfits ended up getting placed in the alternative school. Really, and I can speak most directly about Spokane. 10 years ago, I was part of a movement on the part of the school district to really change the construct of the alternative school to one that was really a choice that could be made by students and families. So it wasn't a placement based on behavior or being a misfit. It was, well, we can offer you a more personalized experience here. If you are not thriving in the typical big comprehensive school, here's a choice for you.
Right.
And a couple of programs, particularly the On Track Academy in Spokane Public Schools and the community school, which is a project-based school, just a few blocks from here, really.
Right.
Are two alternatives that emerged from that movement. And the interest is to empower families as consumers to really drive the market for quality education. And the more students and families who want those alternative settings, the more of them there will be.
We're going to see more pop up, and we're seeing more pop up.
Yes.
On Track, I'm glad you brought that up. I got the chance to visit them last year, and that's a cool program too. I mean, I think about the stuff that's, again, it's the amazing thing that we get to sit down and have these conversations, because I start to think about, again, what the purpose of this is all about, and it's what are the cool things that are happening out there, and these programs are part of it. And I like how you talk about it's that choice piece, as the consumers are saying, this is what is right for my kid, that's the piece that we need to see versus the, what do I want to call it? The traditional setting where, the masses are going through, and I do, I try to reflect back on my schooling, and I think about the kids that were, moved on to the different programs, if you will, and yeah, I mean, I think about the I guess the thought process or the connotation of what those kids represented, and that's not it at all is what we're finding out. We're finding out what we were offering just wasn't the right thing for them.
Correct.
And now you put them in this other environment, and all of a sudden you see these kids just thrive. And that's what we're here for, is to see that light bulb come on and that learning happen. So that's a great thing.
Right.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, and some of the drivers there is our community recognized that the dropout rates we were experiencing in Spokane, both the city of Spokane and in outlying areas, were just unacceptable. We couldn't have 25 or 30 or 35% of our kids not complete a high school diploma.
Right.
But to engage more students and engage their families, we had to start offering alternatives that were more meaningful to them, that were more in line with their interests and their style of learning. Lots of kids need a much more hands-on kind of experience. You talk about Spokane Valley Tech.
Yeah.
Kids need to learn through doing. Another program that's been really quite successful is the River Point Academy.
Yeah.
Which is
up in Meade,
in the Meade School District. They are a blended project-based learning, along with they're into this makers movement, which is really focused on how do we engage kids through activities in crafting things, and designing things,
inquiry almost, right? Yeah.
It stimulates their imagination, stimulates their creativity, gives them a sense of empowerment to make things.
Sure.
So that's really a quite successful program. Many of those programs right now have deep waiting lists.
Yeah.
Isn't
that interesting?
Yes.
I mean, I think that tells a lot about our education system as a whole right now too, and what, as you said, the consumer is looking for. Where do charter schools fit in with this? I mean, I think about choice, and I think that was one of the pieces that, that kind of popped out or was in the news for a while, was the whole idea of charter schools. Where do they fit in?
Well, charter schools are public schools in the state of Washington. They come into being through a charter.
Okay.
So they can either be chartered by the state or by a school district.
Okay.
Spokane School District is one of the few districts that has the capacity to charter a school.
Okay.
But where they really fit is that it's another choice.
Right.
very often charters are organized around themes or particular grade levels. The Spokane International School, or
yes.
I hope I have that title right.
I think you do.
They're really organized through an interest in international awareness and teaching languages. Many families would find that appealing. So again, it's another option.
Okay. The behind the scenes, the funding, is that does it fall into the same realm of, is it the number of days and hours, or is it the learning plan?
I believe that all charters, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, I'm going to say it. I believe that all charters in Washington are based on a regular attendance year.
Okay.
So not alternative funding, but that's not to say that they're not an alternative as a learning environment.
Right. I gotcha. So again, the behind the scenes versus the user interface, if you will.
Right.
Excellent. So I know we're running short on time here, kind of getting wrapped up, and I could probably keep going and ask you a whole bunch more questions about the different programs that are out there. Is there anything else, thinking about awareness of ALE programs, anything else that the viewers should know about?
Well, I think you hit on the key word is awareness. The community, particularly parents and people who are charged with taking care of young people, need to be aware that there are options out there.
Right.
And to seek them out and to understand what they are, particularly if a young person is struggling to thrive in the school that they're in currently. It happens. We don't want any of those kids to fall through the cracks.
No.
So I really encourage families to be proactive and to know what options are available and to seek them out.
Great. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show today. I think those are great final words, just to kind of remember the key piece here is making sure that no kid falls through the cracks. There are options out there, and we need to be proactive and go out there on behalf of our students and behalf of our kids. So, Kevin, again, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next time on Education 101.
Education 101 is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Education 101 is brought to you by our friends at STCU. Ask Erik a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.